Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me, as always, from the Bessie Generate. What was the thing?
The Benny Gesserit?
Benny Gesserit. That's what I'm trying to say. Tara's here.
Greetings, citizens.
Welcome. This is a science fiction movie podcast. We get together, we watch a sci-fi movie, we talk about it, and on today's show we are talking about the 1984 version of Dune from director David Lynch, of all people. And we're going to get into this. This is a notorious film. It does not have the best reputation as far as movies go. It is kind of seen as a bit of a mess. So I'll be curious to see how we think of this. I've seen it once before. I actually reviewed it once before on my first viewing a few years ago, and this is a return for me. Had you seen this before, Tara?
Yeah, I've seen it a couple of times. I remember watching it as a kid. I'm not sure how old and how much it really stuck with me. And I remember I watched it not too long ago. I watched it, I want to say when it was announced that Denis Villeneuve was making a new one. I returned and watched it again.
Which, of course, is why we're doing this now, because we are now mere weeks away from the new version, which, of course, we're going to review as well. And,
well, it's already out for a lot of people.
It's out for a select few countries. It's not a lot of people. It's like 5 countries.
I'm still a little bit jealous.
Sure, but like, it's especially weird since it was meant to come out in like a week or two, and it get pushed to later in October at some random point. So that's a bit weird, especially since
it's meant to come out a year ago.
Oh, true, but it was originally, or not originally, but for the longest time it was meant to be like October 10th or something like that, and then it got pushed to the 20th. It got pushed by like 2 weeks. I don't know why, but it did. And it's just weird that other countries, fairly random countries at that, seem to just get it like in September when everyone else is waiting until like later in October. I'm not sure why that is, but that's the position we're in. So, but that's why we're doing it. And we're also going to be looking at Arrival in a couple of weeks' time, just to sort of wrap up Villeneuve's science fiction work on the show. Obviously, we've already done Blade Runner 2049, so I look forward to that in a couple of weeks. But we're here today to talk about Dune 1984. The movie which tries to pack in the story of Dune into just over 2 hours and 10 minutes, give or take. So we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about it. I guess we'll start spoiler free. As far as experience with the source material, I have listened to the first 6 or 7 chapters on audiobook, and that's as far as I got. Have you read or listened to the audiobook?
I've probably attempted to read Dune like 6 times. And I just don't get into it very well. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do the audiobook this time, and I'm going to do it before the new movie comes out.
Okay.
I have plenty of time. I'm just going to do it.
What's interesting is I don't remember if this attempt to listen to the audiobook, which I did enjoy as I was doing it. I just have no time to read books. Like, that's just the simple truth of it. To keep it up with movies, TV, comics, and video games is just like, that's a challenge as it is, and I struggle with keeping all those.
That's true. I do have to. That does mean I have to read it before. Well, not just before the new Dune, but before the new Far Cry, because that will be all my time.
So you've got a week. You've got just over a week to. At the time of recording, you've got just over a week.
Yeah, easy. I can do it.
Okay. All right. We'll see. So yeah, I something that I might one day return to and actually make an effort to do. But what's interesting is I don't remember if this attempt, I think it was after I watched the movie for the first time. And I think what was interesting this time watching it is that in the first 10-15 minutes, it throws a lot of words and a lot of names of things at you. There's a lot of exposition, and I will say that even just having listened to the audiobook for the first like 6-7 chapters, it did make it easy to process a lot of the information better, because the book spends time introducing the various concepts, the couple of different families, the different types of people, like the Mentats, for example. So when those things came up in the movie, like I felt like I had a bit of an understanding this time. At least I had a better grasp on it at the start. But notably, as the movie went on, and it got into material that I hadn't heard from the book, it became more and more difficult to follow some of the weird things that was introducing out of nowhere, stuff that I presume is properly established in the book and set up and paid off. And there's a reason this movie crams far too much. It really need to simplify it, right? It's a bit of a mess of a movie, but I will say this: it's an interesting mess, and it is a very visually pleasant mess because the miniatures, the matte paintings, all of the practical effects, the opticals, all that stuff is wonderful. And as a fan of David Lynch, and this is very much not a David Lynch film, even though David Lynch did direct it, it's not really a David Lynch movie, even with some David Lynch cast members snuck in there, including himself in one small cameo. It's not really a David Lynch movie. Some of the dream sequences you could argue are a little David Lynch-esque, but in the context of this movie, they just feel out of place and just feel like, what is this? What are we doing right now? So, I think I was a bit generous when I first saw it because I was so wowed at how it looked, and I probably rated it a little too highly. But, so my rating's probably going to go down from my first viewing, but I still have fun watching it, although admittedly, I did find it easy to zone out at various points. And I almost struggled to pay attention at certain parts where it just felt like it was running through different, like, new exposition constantly, trying to explain things and skip over. I mean, the new movie's going to be a two-parter if the first one's successful enough to get the second half. But if the new movie coming out is only half of the story, which I think will only be to its benefit given how overly crammed and how little explained some of the stuff is in this. So, how did you feel watching the movie again?
I really like this movie, and I think, yeah, the visuals are what puts it over the edge. Also, the soundtrack. I think the soundtrack is really, it is really, like, rocking. It kind of makes some scenes, like, extra awesome just because of that electric guitar that comes in. But yeah, visually, like, it's disgusting. It's crazy. It's wild. And it's also really beautiful in a lot of the moments. I think that there's a lot of this movie that is missing, especially in the third part where you're just all of a sudden like, oh, we're just time traveling now.
Well, yeah.
Through a lot.
Well, time jumping, just because we're a science fiction show, so that's just specified.
I guess that's true, yeah.
Not time traveling, just time jumping.
Yeah, the pacing of this film is wild. And it really seems like there's like an hour missing.
Yeah, there's a moment where it basically just casually said, over the next 2 years, this happened in a montage. I'm like, what?
It feels like this is a lot of stuff that would have been a good movie.
Yeah, some of this seems like it might be quite interesting.
Yeah.
So
but I still really like it though. I really do enjoy watching it. It's a wild ride.
What's funny to me, and I think that we both like this more than the thing I'm going to compare it to, but what's funny to me is how much this and Blade Runner kind of line up in that technically they're both wonderful, right? The sound, the music, the visuals, the effects. We love this, all that in both. And Sean Young in a romance that I don't buy is in both movies. It's not as much of a problem in this one because it's not the emotional crutch of the film.
I'd say it's more of the storytelling element that's introduced in the last part of it is why it suffers.
Yeah.
It's just because it's all done through, time jumps.
I can't really blame her for this, but I will say I've yet to see her in a movie where she has chemistry with her romantic partner in the movie. And it's really just this in Blade Runner. I've not really seen her in a whole lot of things, but it's just kind of funny to me when it dawned on me, wait, this is her from Blade Runner, and oh, I don't care about this romance. That's funny. This is a bit of a trend that's growing with her. So yeah, that is an interesting comparison, I think. In terms of, and I think we both sound more positive on this. I think we both appreciate, because Blade Runner is kind of a problem for us because we think that the events that play out, everything about it we should love. We love the themes, the ideas, there's moments we like, and all the technical aspects, but the main through line in the writing is just too dull, slow, and boring, right? This movie is actually the opposite problem in that even though all the things we like are the same, the technical qualities, the music, the visuals, there's some great moments, but It's that the story is far too jam-packed and overstuffed, and it's speeding through too many things it needs to explain. I think to fit this in one movie, I really think you had to like take out some of the ideas. I think there's too many ideas to fit this into one movie. There's too many things they have to explain. Chosen One stuff, along with Secret Water stuff, along with different factions and things like that, rituals and beliefs, and just. And so much of it like is either quickly introduced early on and it's like in narration, and there's a lot of this movie does this thing where it tries to keep some of the narration from the books, where almost every character has at least one or two moments where you'll hear their thoughts, right? It just kind of does it every so often. But the problem is that when you're hearing talking constantly, it's actually hard to take in the information if you're just, especially when it's all new concepts. So the first 10 minutes, I mean, it's a problem throughout the whole movie, honestly, but the first 10 minutes especially, where it's introducing like the two families, the Emperor, it's introducing the Bene Gesserit, it's introducing the different planets, it's introducing the idea of the Chosen One, the idea that Lady Jessica's not supposed to have any sons, only daughters, because she was in that group, but then she kind of broke the rule and had a son anyway, and like, okay,
especially since there's so many scenes where they're already like showing you and not telling you, and then they tell you on top of that what's going in their heads. You're like, I got it.
And that may actually be a Blade Runner comparison. I do wonder if that was a studio, or you to narrate more of this to explain what's going on.
Well, I mean, Virginia Madsen's there to do the exposition throughout the film, and I guess that's her only reason for being there. She shows up in like two scenes also where she's just
standing
there.
Yeah, she's just standing.
She shows up and their dad's like, get out of here. Okay. And then that's what we see of her. That's her character. But like she is our narrator officially, but then everybody is our narrator. And then I think there are like characters that have telepathy, so that can be a bit confusing also. Like are you speaking, like are the people hearing you? Are you like sending your thoughts, or is this just a narration for us?
I actually wasn't sure if it was telepathy, to be honest. It's kind of unclear in the movie, which I think is, again, one of those things where there's so many ideas getting thrown at us that some of them are just poorly explained or defined. Because one of the things, there's a big deal later on in the film, especially, about how our main character, played by Kelly MacLachlan, he's Paul Atreides, son of the Duke Atreides, and that's Jurgen Prock now. And they're coming to take over the planet Arrakis, which is also known as Dune, and that's where the spice is. The spice is this resource that comes from the sand on Dune, which basically is for everything. It's a drug, but it also fuels the space travel they use, where they sort of fold time and reality to jump across the universe, blah, blah, blah. All that stuff, right? That's all fine. But, so, the not the natives necessarily, but the people who have sort of become the adopted natives of Arrakis, the humans who have kind of adapted and their eyes have turned blue and they live there. Those people want to learn how to fight like the Atreides do, like that family does. And they bring up, and as he's training them, some stuff that I thought, it felt like it was supposed to explain some of this to me at the start of the movie when we had his training scene. But when they casually mentioned later on that, oh, this is about turning your own sounds into a weapon and firing, that's what fuels the gun thing. I'm like, wait, did they mention this? Did they even imply this earlier on? Because I think
there was some implication early on about using the voice as a weapon, but like we aren't shown anything like that.
Yeah,
it's just like, oh yeah, everybody can do this. Like, if you just know how to resonate.
Because there's so many like concepts that it just has to quickly explain in one line of narration or dialogue. Like, oh, this is a rule that is now about to be broken. It's like, well, it has no weight then, because you've just explained it to me in the same scene you're going to break it. And that just makes everything feel light and fluffy. And it's one of those things where I'm sure people who have read the book and know this all inside and out are probably recognizing all these things, going, oh, that's referencing this and that's referencing that, and it's probably really fun for them. But the movie on its own doesn't sell us on a lot of these things. It just quickly goes... Like, there's no way we're going to mention every idea this movie has, because it's impossible to remember them all. I'd have to watch it 4 times and take dubious notes. It would be a silly amount. So it's so that is a problem. That's a problem. It kind of feels like the movie's constantly buckling under the weight of how much is in it, and everything we're talking about is them in editing and even in writing, but definitely in editing, trying to make sure all the information is technically there. But making sure all the information is technically there does not a good movie make. It's how the information is presented, its pacing, it's all these things. And this movie, just, you know, so it is a mess. It is a glorious mess, but it is a mess.
Yeah. Oh yeah, like it's, you know, it's crashing and burning, but it's shining really bright along the way.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting that. It's a car crash, but the fire's prey.
Yeah.
I can't imagine, like, David Lynch, like, I assume he's a fan of the book and that's maybe why he was talked into doing this, but I can't imagine him enjoy, there's, you know, scenes, not to get into spoilers, but there's, you know, big action scenes towards the end, and all I could think was, like, I've never seen a David Lynch movie with an action scene like this in it, and I can only imagine him sitting there in the directing chair being miserable that he's having to do all this coverage for stuff that's going to have optical effects. And, you know, he strikes me as a director who loves, like, doing stuff in camera and getting the actors and, like, doing the weird shit on screen, and most of it is going to be there on the day because he doesn't use that much. I mean, there is effects in some of his work, but not, like, it's mostly dramatic actor work. It's mostly, okay, we're going to do weird stuff, but we're going to do weird stuff that's like a performance that I can direct. And so much of these big action sequences are, oh, okay, now there's going to be, like, all these guys firing blasters, and you're going to be up there firing a blaster, and dive out the way and go, ah, like, that's just not something much likes.
Yeah, there's a couple of, like, mini trampoline moments.
Insane cast, though. I'd forgotten some of the names that were in this. Brad Dourif was a surprise to me. I'd forgotten he was in this.
Yeah, I remember him being in there from the last time I watched it as Piter.
Yeah. Patrick Stewart, of course. Before his days in the Enterprise, he was serving under Paul Atreides.
Yeah. Not too long before.
Not too long, yeah, it's only a few years. This is 84 and Star Trek Next Gen.
Somehow looks older here than he does in Star Trek to me.
I could see that. I think, especially later on, because he's got the longer hair.
Mm-hmm.
He's still bald at the top, but he's got the longer. He's got the Bill Bailey, which I know you won't get who that is, but for UK folk, he's got the Bill Bailey.
I don't know who Bill Bailey is, but I know what his hair looks like now.
You've seen him in something because he has a small role in Hot Fuzz. However, he's wearing a wig in that, so you wouldn't know what his hair looks like. But he is there technically.
I haven't seen that movie in so long.
So yeah, you got so yeah, the more of this cast. Sting, the singer, not the wrestler. He's in there. You've got Jürgen Prochnow. You've got, you mentioned Virginia Madsen in that small role. Sean Young's the love interest. Oh god, there's so much. Oh, the teacher, the principal from Kindergarten Cop has got a small role in this, which made me go, huh?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, Dean Stockwell.
Dean Stockwell, of course. A couple of Lynch regulars, obviously Kelly MacLachlan as well, of course. But Jack Nance and Everett McGill. Everett McGill is kind of the leader of the Fremen in this. He has got a major role in Twin Peaks. Although the first thing I ever saw him in, funnily enough, he was the bad guy in Under Siege 2. So that's where I know him from.
Good movie.
I mean, good's debatable, but it's a fun movie. So, you know, hell of a cast. Hell of a mixed bunch of people that are recognizable from various things. So, you know, it's kind of fun seeing the faces. And
I forgot it was Jürgen Prochnow. Like, oh, cool. Guy from Das Boot.
Hey, don't forget Wing Commander.
Wing Commander. Shh, there's a destroyer hunting us.
Yeah. Obviously, after the mixed reception this got, like, you know, if you told Jürgen Prochnow you're going to be in a much, much worse sci-fi movie than this, in about another decade and a half, you're going to
He's
be
like,
in...
oh no, I learned my lesson. I swear.
15 years later, he's in a Wing Commander with Freddie Prinze Jr. and what's her face from Deep Blue Sea who can't act.
I don't remember her name.
Oh dear. So yeah, great cast. It's a great cast. It's clear that obviously this book is very popular amongst writers, filmmakers, nerds alike. You know, like it's a big deal.
I'll get there one day.
Yeah, it's a
in
big,
like a week.
you know, it's the seminal science fiction work in a lot of ways. You know, fantasy writing has Lord of the Rings. Science fiction writing has Dune in many ways.
Yeah, I'd say it's still very fantasy.
There's a lot of fantasy in this. There's definitely the families. There's a sort of regal to it, which isn't necessarily to my taste, but there's a lot of stuff in here that I do like. I love the look of the Baron Harkonnen, like his planet, like in all the green.
Yeah.
So it's almost Borg-esque at times, the color scheme that he has.
Yeah, and they seem like they're far from nature too. Like they're super unhealthy. They don't even walk anymore, or at least the Baron doesn't walk.
He's got a flying, which I do remember his introduction in the book. He did have, I mean, he was described as way fatter in the book, but
yeah, and he's got he's covered in boils, and he's described by his doctor as beautiful, even though he looks like he just looks sick.
Yeah, and it's not even
like
just
he's ill everywhere.
It's not even just generally beautiful either. He specifically goes, "Your boils are so great, Baron." Like he doesn't call him sexy or anything, but he's complimenting all the things that are clearly ugly and hideous.
Yeah, there's an episode of Disenchantment that I really enjoyed where the king wants to get gout because the gout is considered a kingly disease because only people who eat very unhealthy because they have this they have the wealth in order to be able to eat nothing but cakes all the time get gout. And so like it's like a regal disease to get, so he wants to get gout. That's kind of what it reminds me of.
Yeah, well, that was the thing. Once upon a time, being overweight was considered a sign of wealth, which, you know, obviously that's faded along.
It might be what this is taken from, and then it's like, you know, times 1,000 to be disgusting.
Well, I mean, I think it's even more than that. It's just the idea that he is so, like disgustingly, like, in power in every way. Like, it's not just that
he's even like, there is a little bit of like a sexual attraction to like the young, perfect looking male body that he is like drawn to also. Like Sting comes out at one point and he's just like, it's just basically showing off his body, and it's just slim and trim, and like he looks at him like in this way where he like almost like he wants to eat him. Like he's just he's admiring, but in a really disgusting way.
Yeah, he's got his eye on him. He's watching every step he takes, every breath he makes.
I understand that reference.
It's the only Sting song, I think. Well, I know Heroes, obviously, but I couldn't word that into this. It's just too positive and uplifting for
yeah
for this.
Well, I guess that's a police song.
Yeah. Oh yeah, but that's still Sting.
Yeah. Message in a bottle.
It's the same difference. Just a nice little song about stalking someone. So yeah, no, I love the design of that. I actually sent you an image of the Emperor standing next to some of the ladies, right, with the headdresses on, and I sort of joked it looked kind of like Centauri. And I don't think that's an accident, in the sense that obviously this is meant to be an emperor, and Centauri and Babylon 5 are meant to be the ones with an empire. So obviously there's a clear, even if there's no inspiration, although I'm assuming that JMS probably likes the book. I'm just going to throw it out there. Yeah. He probably likes Dune, but it was just because the women that were standing with them, from the message generator, they're bald, right, and they've got this headdress, and that really made me think of the female Centauri.
They're seers also.
Yes. So
they have this mysticism about them.
There was a lot of comparisons to be made there, and I hadn't watched Babylon 5 yet when I watched this last time, so these thoughts weren't there. But worth mentioning. It's funny because when I was watching it, I was thinking that this is one of these science fiction pieces that kind of take place in an alternate universe, in the sense that some science fiction set in space, it's like, oh, this is just in our future. I would argue Star Wars, even though it says set a long time ago, it's kind of an alternate universe in the sense that, I mean, it's so separated and there's no hint of Earth or any connection to us.
Well, Dune takes place in the year 10,000
Well, that's what I was going to say. The only connection to it technically being in our future is the year, they say, but everything about it, everything, the planets, the people, it all feels like it's just its own, these are the 3 planets that are part of this system that functions. Maybe there's a lot of prequel and sequel books. Maybe they go into like how it connects to like our timeline or something.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is true, but there aren't really any aliens in Dune except for like the sandworms, I suppose. But like, every like intelligent being that's communicating with each other, they're all some sort of human that's been like changed because of the spice. So even like the giant like fat eel looking thing that talks in the tank they're all humans. They've just been so like in with the spice, like the spice has changed them and their environment to where they're just like this blob of a person that has to live in a tank of water now to move.
I mean, I'm surprised to hear that about that particular being, because that creature is so unhuman that
It has human eyes though.
Because everyone else is kind of like, you know, their eye colors change. They look a little bit.
They're all ginger.
Yeah, the villains are all ginger. I'm sure when I talked to Connor about this, I'm sure there was some jokes cracked at his expense about the villains all having ginger hair.
That doesn't seem to have transferred over into the new film.
Not from the trailer, no. Honestly, I genuinely think that I'm assuming the new film is going to be better because of a lot of reasons, mainly because it's getting more time to like spread its story out. But I will say I do think that I might prefer some of the visuals of the old one, because you know the new one's got that.
I mean, it's so interesting looking.
But the new one, you know, it's that sleek CG kind of thing where it's just okay. There's like perfect sand dunes behind them. They're in big, empty, clear science fiction looking rooms. You know, if you compare the scene near the start where, what's her face comes to do the hand in the box test, right? It's got a name, but I'm not going to remember it. Let's not pretend that I will, right? And you know, Paul comes in and it's all put the hand in the box, and he feels this pain, but he can't take it out. Yeah. And we can talk about that more in a bit, but you see a bit of that scene in the trailer for the new one, and it's in this infinite dark room kind of look, and it's like this like super clean. There's nothing there. Whereas in this movie. No, it looks like a room that's in a palace. That's just like this is a small study or something that she's doing this in.
Yeah, I like the visual effects of that scene too, where Paul is imagining what's going through it inside the box. Like,
yeah,
you can kind of see what is happening to his hand.
Yeah, but what I'm saying though is I actually like that it is just in a room. It's just there's a sense of geography. There's a sense of. Whereas I look at the scene in the trailer for the new one, and I just think this looks unrealistically clean and like empty and infinite. And a lot of movies like to do this these days, and because they can just have the CG kind of fill out the back of the room, or they can just whatever, they can infinitely extend things, and it makes it feel less real to me. And I kind of like that this is just a room in the building. It's not trying to be overly flashy with it. So while I do think the new one will probably be better for a lot of the reasons we're going to say, and I've already said why this one is a bit of a mess, there are things like that where technology is going to let them do things that I think are excessive and just aren't necessary. So
the miniatures of the sandworms in this one are great.
Oh,
also,
yeah.
Which is the thing that we're going to lose. But I mean, in the trailer, the sandworm that we get to see looks pretty cool. But like I love when they first show up and stuff. I won't say too much, but like you still get the immense scale of them. Like they tell you they're big and stuff, but then because they use all the miniatures, you're like, oh, they're like planet eaters. Like they're big.
yeah, you're thinking like graboids maybe, or maybe a bit bigger than that. It wouldn't surprise me if Dune even inspired Tremors, to be honest, because like, you know,
Sure.
why not?
Yeah, there's something kind of similar. They're more like whale-like, I guess, in Breath of the Wild and Zelda, but it's the same idea. You go to like this desert area, and the walking will inspire you. Like you'll start to see something moved in the sand, and it's just a giant. Like it's way bigger than you're expecting to come out of the ground.
Yeah. And there's lots of little things here, like when they do get to some of the stuff in the desert and the sand, you know, there's a device that's pulled out that's called a thumper, and the idea it's a distraction. It's like, okay, this will make a pulse, so we can travel safely for a little bit whilst the worm's distracted by this noise, this vibration. And I'm like, these are the sort of things, like these little details. I'm like, I feel like there's a lot more to explore here about how to traverse through the desert, and so much of it's like glossed over so quickly because it just has to keep going. It has to keep getting to that next thing because there's so much to get through. And there's a couple of things at the end that I don't like that much. Not a lot, but we're talking like after the big fighting's all done. There's a couple of like things right at the very end that I'm just a bit. This is a bit. Maybe this works in the book because you've set all these things up, but in the context of the movie, I'm like, I wasn't expecting quite this. You know, when you were saying that, you know, Paul was going to be the chosen one, which, to be fair, like as a plot device in science fiction, especially science fiction that skews more fantasy, and definitely in fantasy itself, I think collectively, I think most people are a little sick of the idea of a chosen one. There's a little bit of the
I think it does turn out to be a bit different than you think in the books.
Sure, yeah.
'Cause I know a little bit about the Dune series, but I think it's actually, it would be something more to your taste if you kept going with the series.
Oh, I'm happy to hear that, and you know, maybe the new movies will do that. But I think part of the problem is, and obviously, like everyone pretty much in this movie is white, but it does come off a bit white saviory, right? If I take away the fact that everyone's white, like he comes and he goes to the Fremen and kind of becomes their guy, and it's a little bit like that, and it's not like a huge deal. I'm just saying, but some of the tropes that it shares with that are there.
Yeah, it's kind of Avatar.
Yeah, and that's a movie I enjoy still. But even in that, I'm like, okay,
too.
You know, he goes to the jungle and he becomes the savior of those people.
What they needed was a white guy to show up and save them.
And
they just needed to train Tom Cruise to be a samurai, and now we can all survive.
I've not seen Last Samurai, but yeah, I suspect there's some comparisons.
I actually have not seen it in a long time. I remember really liking it, though. I think I saw it a couple times.
Here you just swap out race for it's the rich, like royal family chosen one who comes and saves all of the I don't know if they're technically poor. I mean, I guess they are, but they're kind of outside the system. The Fremen. But you know, there's shades of that, and like part of that's kind of like you're going to have to sell. Like I like him because he's Kelly MacLachlan, but I don't know if there's anything in the movie to actually make me like this character. And I think that's maybe even from what I heard of the book when I listened to the audiobook, I was kind of waiting for, okay, when are you going to make me like this character? You're telling me he's important and special.
When is Paul going to actually prove himself to be useful rather than...
You can tell me he's skilled, you can tell me he's already good at fighting, you can tell me that he's like really intelligent and looks up all the, you know, researches and learns history and all that. But when am I going to like him? When are you going to convince me that I should give a shit about him and believe that he is the important person in this story? So, and that, if there's one concern I have about the new movies is that I look at the trailer and I see young Timothée Chalamet, and I'm like, okay, how are you going to sell me on him that he's the important one, and that I'm not going to care more about 20 other characters, because the movie's going to have 20 other characters that might be more interesting than he is. So I'll be curious to see how they handle that.
Well, even in this film, like I found myself rooting more, like, okay, like I see why the Duke is a good person, why he is like, like right away he goes and he cares more about the people than he does like, the spice, and he's like, he really is like saving people. So like the movie gives you a lot to root for Paul's father more so than you do Paul, because again in the film it's just like he's the best, he's the prophecy, he is
one might even
look at what a natural he is.
One might even call him a Mary Sue if you really want to get to the term.
Right, yeah, he's just natural at everything.
And I think the other part of the problem that it's the same, it's kind of along the same lines, but it kind of adds to this, is the idea that he kind of has like these psychic visions from the start of the movie that are basically just him seeing what his story is going to be. So when we actually get to those beats later in the story, it's like, well, okay, so he's just kind of fulfilling what he suspected that he was like. There's definitely like a missing element of like really rooting and like work, because that's actually one of the complaints I have about the big final battle, which I won't spoil the details of. But honestly, like the good guys just kind of whoop the ass of the bad guys, and there's never even a question that there's like a risk they might lose. It's not like a tough battle with ups and downs where the good guys are on the ropes.
2 years to train, I guess or 2 years to battle. I'm not
but
sure.
It's not interesting. It should be a case of, okay, all this training and 2 years of learning gives them a chance, but it shouldn't be like, they walk in like a bunch of Terminators and just like win, like it's nothing. And that's what it feels like. It feels like the bad guys don't have a chance, and it's not satisfying. And there's no, that's why I don't know if I that's one thing that I don't know if I picked up on last time, but this time I was definitely feeling it towards the end. I'm like, this just feels like they don't have a chance. So therefore, why am I? There's no drama in this. It's again, it feels like in an effort to get all of the details, or as many details as they can from the book into the movie, like they're basically forgetting to actually tell the story in a way that makes me care about the story. They're just rushing through the details. It's kind of why I don't like the Francis Ford Coppola Dracula, because I really like that book and I really hate that movie, because I feel like the atmosphere is just missing the whole time.
I like that movie,
but and maybe the reason why I see beauty in this movie where I don't in that is because it's a practical 80s era science fiction movie, and I like those visuals, and I like all the effects, and I like all the things this is trying to be.
It actually comes off to me more as a 70s film than it does an 80s movie. Like, I think it has
I can see
more.
that.
I would put it closer to like Logan's Run than I would, the Terminator.
Oh yeah, I mean, I wasn't trying to compare. I just said Terminator because they were unstoppable. I didn't mean to compare it.
Yeah, I'm just comparing 70s and 80s movies, but like I think it's more along the lines of Logan's Run. Not that it's that far away from the film. It just it doesn't feel like an 80s movie to me.
I think I have a problem with the Logan's Run comparison because I think the effects and the darker look of this does make it feel at least more like it's post-Alien. Because it's actually at times when we're in the Atreides like palace or castle, whatever it is, near the start of the movie, and we're in the hallways, I was actually thinking, this looks like if you took the phallic stuff out of H.R. Giger's like ship design and just put more bright lights in the room, and that's what this looks like. It had that sort of the dark walls with all the line work. It had that kind of vibe of the alien ship, not of the Nostromo. And I was kind of getting that vibe from it, and a lot of the other things felt a bit more. I mean, I'm not saying this is as good design wise as Alien, because it isn't, or a Star Wars, but I definitely think you can definitely feel it was made after those movies, because the production design is shooting for that. Whereas Logan's Run and everything was really goofy and kind of cheap, and we were
yeah. I'd say it's not. It's It's definitely better than Logan's Run, production wise for sure. But the I don't know, just the look of it kind of reminded me more of something pre-Star Wars than post.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, it looks, and there's some weird effects. There's I was expecting this to come up more, but they introduced a thing early on. It's like a shield that's like a sort of cube like visual effect that comes up over their body.
Yeah. They almost look like they're Minecraft characters all of a sudden.
Yeah, and it was interesting because they said that it's not a perfect shield because if you penetrate it slowly, you can go through it. It only stops quick attacks. So it stops bullets and it stops like a quick knife slice, but if you gently press a knife in, and I was like, oh, that's a really interesting mechanic. I'm curious to see how that plays out in some actual fights. And I feel like there's one moment where you get to see what happens later with someone using that defense, but it never comes up again. And I thought, there's so much potential in this mechanic of like only slow attacks. It really does feel like
there's like a missing hour of this film.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's a scene later on where you see someone get shot in the head with clearly a weapon that's designed to go through the shield. It's designed to have like a sort of, a slower, like, not trajectory, but a slower velocity.
Projectile? Yeah, okay.
And I was like, but what was cool about it though is that the effect of this like sort of clear, like jelly cube still over their head, but you can see the blood on their forehead kind of spreading. I thought it looked really good. I thought it was a really fun little effect, and I thought, oh man, there's so much potential in these. I mean, they're a bit silly looking at first, but there is a lot of. And all I can think is this is another thing where I might not like it in the new one if they introduce this, because in the new one I can almost just see it being like, oh, you won't see anything until they get hit, and there'll be like a little like wave effect, and it'll be like, oh, it'll be so sleek and so like it's invisible. And I'm like,
oh, you really hate this movie that hasn't come out yet?
I don't hate it. I'm just there's a few things aesthetically that I know they're going to do in a modern way, and I think those modern ways are infinitely less interesting.
Well, I mean, if I've learned anything from Denis Villeneuve, it's
Yes.
to trust him.
Okay,
So,
I mean, I don't have the same track record with his films that you do, so but for me, I want to see this cube effect again with modern tech. I don't want to see them redesign it so that it's just like a
you really
invisible
want it
shield.
to be a cube?
Oh yeah, I mean maybe not outright cube, but I want hard edges. I want them to sort of like try and like give me the feel that this was trying to give me, but with better effects. That's what I want from the modern shield in the new movie.
I don't even think David Lynch would make it a cube if he could make this movie again right now.
I don't think David Lynch would make the movie again. I think this was David Lynch's attempt at doing a mainstream studio film, and he probably learned that, because remember, he was in line to do Return of the Jedi, which came out a year before this, and I've got a feeling.
No, I didn't know that.
Oh no, he was at one point, and eventually it didn't happen. But I do wonder, he got to do Dune, which came out a year later, so presumably when that fell through, that I don't know if maybe the Dune talks were already happening, maybe there was like a decision being made between them. I don't know what it was, but it is interesting that I think after that point, like, he never went back to that well. He never, like, he stayed clear of the big budget action movies. He just like, no, I'm David Lynch and I do David Lynch stuff.
I think the only other David Lynch movie I've seen is Mulholland Drive.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. I'm not really that familiar with his filmography outside of that.
Oh, I love David Lynch movies. I mean, this is definitely, like, and objectively, the weakest one that I've seen. It's probably not my least favorite though, but it's definitely the weakest one objectively.
Not a Razorhead?
Oh, Razorhead's great. I love Razorhead.
I don't know if it's good or not.
Razorhead's great. It's Wild at Heart, I'm not that fond of. I know some people love that movie, so some people are going to be mad that I said that, but I never got much out of Wild at Heart when I saw it. But Mulholland Drive, Lost Highway, Blue Velvet, the Twin Peaks saga, great stuff. Love it. So, and Elephant Man's really good. Oh, Elephant Man's actually a really conventional movie for David Lynch, but it's a really good conventional movie.
I might have seen Elephant Man in my younger years.
Eons ago.
Is it the I Am Not an Animal?
Yes. John Hurt is the actor. To bring it back round to Alien, for circling round to
I might
things.
have seen it.
And Anthony Hopkins in it as well, of course. Elephant Man's a great movie. So, yeah. I suppose we can start. I'll give the spoiler warning. We can sort of be a bit more free with our discussions here. It's kind of a weird one to talk about because it just sort of like speeds through so many ideas. Like, I don't know if we're going to talk about every plot beat.
That's okay.
The way that we normally do. I feel like there's enough conversation to just bring up kind of like the ideas and moments that feel notable.
Yeah, and plus we're not like super Frank Herbert Dune fans.
Yes.
We might not be able to accurately say exactly what happens in the film.
No, there's definitely things.
As far as like the different factions.
I remember it coming up early on in the book. They set up this idea. There's this water of life or whatever it's called, that only women who are gifted have been able to survive it, and no man who has ever tried. But there's going to be a chosen one, right? The Quasi Haderach, I think, or something to that effect, is going to, that chosen one will be the only man who will ever be able to do this. And obviously it's building up to
Quetzalcoatl Haderach, I think.
There you go. It's building up to Paul doing that, right? But in the movie, it felt like it introduces this idea that, no man can do this, only women can do this. It feels like it introduces that like right before it's introduced, quite late on, and then he's doing it like, I don't know, a few scenes later. Like, a bit of a montage. I mean, that's just one of the many, many things that it feels like it just throws out there. I mean, if you'd asked me before I watched this again, if to describe things in this movie, there was no way in hell I would ever have remembered in a million years that Paul ends up with a kid sister towards the end of the film, that her mother was already pregnant with at that point.
Yeah, and she ages rapidly because of the well of life.
Yeah, she ages to like, I don't know, 6 or 7 in the space of 2 years, whatever it is.
And she's creepy as, she's a creepy kid.
Yeah, has a lot of knowledge. It's kind of weird. I thought the main woman from the Bene Gesserit, I thought she, like her, like what she actually wanted in her allegiance and who she was rooting for, I thought was kind of mixed, because I felt like she was like excited by the prospect that Paul was the chosen one at the start, but then by the end of the movie she's like terrified of him, and she's like working with the Emperor.
She's sort of pissed off that he's the prophecy.
And I got like confused as to what she really wants. And I don't know if that's on me, but it's probably on the movie, given how much the movie speeds through things.
Yeah.
So that was another thing.
Yeah, there really is. Like, I actually was surprised at how long it takes for Paul to like separate and meet up with the Fremen, because that happens like well past the hour mark of the film, and then from there it's like, okay, we got to fit a whole nother movie into the last, like, what, 40 minutes maybe.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to guess, like, for the new movie, like, when that break is, like, when does the first movie end? It has to. I mean, it has to be building up to the siege and sort of like the assassination of the Duke, right? And like them fleeing, maybe ending with. And admittedly, this means you get almost no Zendaya, in the first movie. Unless, I mean, but for all we know, there could be scenes where we follow the Fremen and what they're doing on their own. And the new one, we don't know.
Well, I remember the Entertainment Weekly photos that came out. You do see them, Paul and Zendaya together. I don't remember her name in the film. Starts with a C. Sean
Young. Sean Young's emotionless love interest. Yes. That character. So, well, yeah, that's interesting. I'm wondering how much we're going to actually see of them together, because to me, that's where you would end it with them ending up with the Fremen, and that's kind of your cliffhanger and your hopeful kind of beat. I mean,
well, I hope it ends at a different scene. I hope it ends with the worm riding. Yeah. And the sweet guitar riff coming
Isn't
through.
That? I mean, that's the best scene in the movie for me. I love that scene.
That guitar like makes everything so awesome. Like all of a sudden you're watching a heavy metal cartoon. Like,
he's riding a really giant worm. He basically digs a big javelin into the side of the worm.
Yeah, it's like what people use for rock climbing.
Yeah, but it makes the worm spin so that it carries him up to the top. And then he puts some rope around a couple of convenient blowholes, and then basically rides it like he's like on a sled. He's like, the guitar music comes in. It gets really operatic, and
it's a real
wonderful.
Like fist pumping moment. Like, this is awesome. I feel so cool, even though when I'm watching, it's kind of crazy.
So that's a great scene. But that's too late for the end of the first. I mean, unless they really go into this 2 years that's glossed over.
Maybe the first movie is just about the worms for the most part. Like, it's about establishing the different houses and the Emperor and the spice, and then but the real threat of the film are the worms.
No, it has to build up to the. Because even in the book, like right out from the start, the whole idea that the Doctor being the one who betrays the Duke, that's like something that's introduced like in the chapters I heard. So that intrigue of building to when this betrayal and like this fall of the Duke, like I feel like in a 2-movie structure, you have to have the fall of the Duke in that first movie. Like, maybe that's not right at the end, maybe that's like earlier, but like I feel like you have to have that so that they're in the new phase for movie 2.
Doesn't that happen before the worm riding?
No, it does, yes. But that's why I'm saying, how could it just focus on the worms if we're going to properly give time to the betrayal and all the character introductions, and like sort of like feeling something when the Duke is betrayed and the predicament that Paul and Jessica are put into, then surely we have to like spend a lot of time in that.
Conquering the worm is the end of part 1. Like, that's the big focus of the first film, as well as setting up everything else for the next film.
Well, that's the part I disagree with. The big focus. That can't be the big focus has to be on the Baron and all their like scheming.
Fine, just let me have one.
If anything, I feel like maybe something that'll come out of this movie if it's split. And again, like maybe they'll do a thing where they sort of jump back and forth. Maybe they'll do like a split narrative or something. I don't know. But if it's split in a way that makes sense, then there really won't be that many worms in the first movie, and that might actually upset people who go in like excited about big worms. Like they see big worm in the trailer and they're like, oh, big worms! I want the big worms, and then they get like one or two worm moments.
Yeah. Well, maybe it'd be like Godzilla, like the 2014 Godzilla. Where it's just like, it's just a tease, and then the big ending is when you get the full shot of the worm, and you're like, okay, it's worth it.
Yeah, but there's a lot of characters to deal with, and there's a lot of like intrigue to set up.
I suspect that'll all be set up. The movie is like really long.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is though,
apparently there's like a 4-hour or 5-hour version or something of it.
If anything, I see the worms being set up, but I see the worms as being more of a secondary thing in the first movie. The second movie is where, because that's where all the worm riding is going to happen. Assuming it's split up in a straight 50-50 kind of first half of the story, second half of the story. The worm riding has to be in the second half, based on this movie.
What if we don't get it?
Then you don't get your worm riding.
Well, that's BS. I hear people really like the movie, so I have faith.
I mean, I hope I like it. I hope I really do like it. But
might be too fantasy for you.
It might be, and I don't love every Villeneuve movie. I mean, I really like Arrival. Not to spoil my thoughts on that, but we'll talk about that soon. I enjoyed Prisoners, but I am mixed on Sicario, and I am mixed on Blade Runner 2049. I've been mixed on a couple of his films, so he's not a surefire hit for me as Villeneuve. So we'll see.
All right.
We'll see. What are we talking about? This spun into you demanding that the worms be the focus of the the new movie when I'm not sure how they can be.
We were talking about how awesome the worm riding scene was.
Well, the worm riding scene is great. Really good. I agree. I agree. As is them riding multiple worms into battle at the end. I mean...
Yeah, or at least the shot of like Kyle MacLachlan in the front and then like his army behind them on top of the worm.
Yeah.
That's a great shot.
There's a lot of fun stuff like that. Like I say, it does feel like there's like no chance of stopping them when they're coming in at the end, which is kind of lame from a dramatic point of view, because it's like, well, I mean, the fight's already over. The parts I didn't like at the end was like everything with like the duel with Sting, with like, oh, we have to have a blade fight now. Just kind of felt like, why are we doing this? Like,
it seems like the most appropriate place to do the Minecraft fight. Also,
that's true.
Where he would have the slow blade victory.
Yeah. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It felt like, and I'm sure, and again, I'm sure in the book, the idea that there has to be this duel is probably set up in some way, but here it just kind of felt like, oh, Sting has to have a big, because Sting's not had a big scene. He's had a scene with his clothes off.
I actually was thinking during the film, like, what happened to Sting? Did I like miss his death or something? And then at the very end, he showed up. Like, I literally thought of it like 10 seconds before he showed up at the end, because I thought the movie was ending and we just forgot about Sting.
But they treat him like he's the big not the biggest villain. The biggest villain's the Baron, but who we do see get shot into a worm's mouth, which is kind of delightful. But
yeah.
But they treat him like he's physically the biggest bad. Like he's the one who's going to put up the biggest like 1-to-1 fight, where Paul's going to have to test his skills against this guy. But like that is like so. I wouldn't say it's not set up at all, because there's a couple of scenes kind of like making him look like, oh, he's going to be a big deal later or something. There's a couple of scenes like that, but as far as selling him as he's the one that the main guy's going to have to fight at the end, and it's going to be what really proves to everyone that he is now the.
He's got the coolest name, Fade Raptha. What a cool name.
I'm surprised. There's too many goofy names in this for me to remember.
Fade, I remember. I think Fade is an awesome name.
And then Kyle MacLachlan, Paul, he makes it rain, and it's never rained on Arrakis. So I don't know if the movie set me up for he straight up can, have godlike powers with this. Like I got that. Okay, he's going to be able to do something that's killed every other man who's tried it, and he's good at things. But I don't know if I necessarily got he is going to actually be able to make it rain, like a biblical figure.
Yeah.
So yeah, the final
Well, they
few
kept
minutes
saying
are-
like he would have the hand of God in his visions, and then he becomes the hand of God at the end, and is able to make it rain like a flood.
oh yeah,
Bring the
that's
floods.
let's not gloss over those weird visions where there's just a floating hand in space, and
Oh, I love them. Yeah, they're cool.
yeah, those are spread throughout the movie. So, and this is the thing where I'm not saying that any of these ideas wise can't work or shouldn't work or don't work in the book, because they might very well be so well set up and it all feels like great payoff to everything that's been breadcrumbed throughout the story. I'm saying that in this movie, as someone who doesn't know the story from the book beyond a couple of the setup stuff and the basics, the ending just feels like, what the hell is this?
Well, it sort of feels like, we're setting up that Paul is like this chosen one that's set up through this prophecy, and then at the end it's like his sister shows up and says he is the prophecy, and everyone says all right, he's the prophecy, and then the movie's over. Like he just sort of, they tell you what's going to happen, he delivers on it, and then it's done. And there's not really a lot of pushback other than, I mean, they fight, but like you said, there's no real threat.
It's also purely defined. Like, okay, well, what now then? Like, is the whole point just to unite all the humans together into one system? Is it, it's just not super defined in the movie. And again, I'm assuming it is in the book, but in the movie, it just kind of feels like okay, what now then? Okay, okay, sure. I mean, I suppose the main thing is that the Fremen are kind of like now actually in control of Arrakis, and this is their planet now, and as they should be, and it's them taking control, and that's great and all, but there's still all these politics with the other planets, and the Emperor was like behind helping the Baron try to double cross the Duke in the first place, and because that's the other thing, like at the start of the movie when they're throwing out all these names and saying, oh, so, and it's the guild, so the guild, which is the big space looking creature with the weird kind of, not quite a vagina, but there's the mouth's very, it's like flaps, it's like flesh flaps.
I guess there's a little bit of genitalia implied there.
But he's in a tank, and so this group are the ones who like control the space travel, and that is run on space. Space is used for a lot of things, but that's the biggest thing space is used for, is the getting around. And he's like, be honest.
I love the look of them too. I think they look awesome.
Well, the creature are his soldiers, like his troops.
Well, the creature and like the way they have to like wheel it in. Like,
okay,
for people that are in charge of space travel, they don't look like they could travel very well.
But he basically has the Emperor admit what his plans are. Like, you're planning something, let us in on what it is, or be death. It's okay. So this tells us that the guild that do space travel are actually higher ranking than the Emperor in terms of like effective power, because they can threaten the Emperor, right? So that's the first thing.
Control the spice in a way too.
Yeah, in a way, yeah. But the Emperor, like, says his plan, and it made some amount of sense to me in this viewing, because again, I've seen it before, for one, and for two, because I'd listened to some of the first parts of the book. I was familiar with the House Atreides, with the Baron, like I was familiar with those basic setups, but it was occurring to me like watching it this time, like when he like says his plan here, he's like, okay, I'm working with the Baron Harkonnen, and he's pulled out of Arrakis, and the Atreides family are going to move in, but we're actually working with the Baron because Atreides are building this really fancy army with their new technology that might actually beat us one day, so we're actually doing this to double cross the Duke Atreides, and the Fremen are not involved because they're, we're not worried about them. And so Alec goes through his whole plan, and it's just kind of like, did anyone, how much of that could someone who's not heard any of these names before really follow, especially when they start mentioning planet names as well? It feels like a lot of this.
Did you listen to Virginia Madsen in the beginning?
But even she's hard to listen to because she's just throwing like...
Yeah, it's just so much at once.
And she says it in this way where we're supposed to understand what certain terms mean, or... Like, you really have to show some of it and then have the dialogue kind of fill in the blanks so the audience can kind of like go, okay, I understand the concept. Okay, so space is this fuel, it is this resource that is used to travel, but also used in combat. It's used for a lot of different things.
I mean, I'm sure you hate it, but I think the perfect example is the opening of The Lord of the Rings, where you just have Galadriel talking about the different rings and the different groups, the different factions, and it's all playing out with her talking about it, and then you get like this little mini like exposition of what happened to the One Ring and how it traveled and how it got to where it is now. And you're like, okay, I'm caught up. I think I know everything I need to know. And I think that's like done the best, and maybe you could have done something similar here.
I think the key to it is, at least the way I typically like it, is that you start off with a more of a smaller lens. You start off with a window into one part of this world, and then you expand. And admittedly, I'm thinking more of a TV show here, but I typically like, episode 1 of a TV show, introduce the 2 or 3 big things you have to know right away. And there's probably maybe 6 or 7 things total that are really important to the show, but it's okay to leave a couple of them for episode 2. So have the audience really get to grips with, okay, this is the core group of characters, right? But then introduce this third party in episode 2, or or so on and so forth, right? And I think the same goes for a book with chapters. You have one chapter that is just about this one character and their family in the context, and it hints at some things, sure, but you don't have to understand those hints yet. You get that it's a larger world, but we're focused on just learning who this is. And then chapter 2 introduces another perspective, and you start to slowly build up the world. This movie immediately is like this, and it has the gall of giving you a literal a map almost of the universe, where it shows you the 3 or 4 planets. And
there's 4 planets, and you're like,
and it labels them.
Arrakis, here's this one, here's that one. Like, I'm done.
Especially when you're doing a story where you have an entirely fictionalized system where it's all planets with their own names, it's all positions, and sure, emperor's a word we use, right? And duke's a word we use. But the context of, okay, what's the actual structure of the system in this fictional world that you've created?
Yeah. I mean, that's why I have such a hard time with fantasy a lot.
Oh yeah, me too.
Because you're not on Earth, where it's something kind of like Earth, but it's Middle Earth. That's why I think the Lord of the Rings is a really great example, because I tried reading that book before the movies came out, and I gave up halfway through the first one. And once the movie came out, and it broke everything down so well, I was able to just fly through the whole trilogy, because they're like, okay, I got it now. I just needed to be shown. I just need my hand held a little bit, and now I can get into that world and I understand.
This is almost the opposite, where I'm saying that from what I listened to in the audiobook, it did a fine job of one by one. Here's this chapter with Paul, learn who he is, and sort of teasing why this woman's coming to visit him, and that kind of a focus of just one chapter, just the hand in the box. That's that chapter.
Yeah.
And then
that's not even the beginning of this film. We get a lot more exposition, and then we get the hand in the box scene later on.
Yeah, because I think that's the first chapter in the book. I think it is him waking up. Yeah, and yeah.
I've read it many times.
You've tried to read it so many times that that's the first chapter.
I'm gonna skip it when I start it again.
Actually, I noticed when we got to the actual hand in the box test, I looked at the runtime. We were 30 minutes into the movie at that point.
Oh wow, yeah. Actually, I didn't feel the runtime of the movie at all. I actually thought it went by pretty fast for me.
I think it did for me the first time. I think this time I was feeling it a bit more because the sheen of it had worn off. Because it's it's been a couple of years since I saw it, but it's not long enough that I've forgotten how I felt, or all the moments I liked. I'd forgotten a lot of things. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of stuff in this movie to forget, but all the good stuff I remembered. So it was kind of it was I'm waiting for the moments I know I like. Whereas the first time it was this sense of discovery. It was this sense of whatever. But because by the time we get to the hand in the box in this movie, we've already had the extended training sequence with Picard and the the weird drone thing that comes out of the ceiling that has blades and spikes and stuff and drill bits.
Yeah, the training wheel spindle thing.
Yeah, we've had that already. Which I mean, not that reorganizing some of the scenes is a big deal. There's legitimate reasons for maybe doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But it does kind of mean that instead of having this definitive starting point, you have this weird. Oh, it's Virginia Madsen's face in space, saying the space.
Why
is
is she important? She's just the daughter of the emperor, and that's it.
I didn't even notice she was the daughter of the emperor until really late in the movie, because she was standing next to him.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird intro where she's talking about it. She brings up the emperor and she says, "My father," and oh, I forgot to tell you. Like, I thought that was kind of a strange.
It's
like,
funny because
she's on the phone with us. Oh, and one more thing. I forgot to tell you.
I feel bad when we're doing reviews of things, and in a podcast setting, where obviously this is more of a free-flowing thing, and naturally sometimes it just happens where we'll get to a point in the story that we're talking about or something, and I'll say, oh, I should have mentioned this earlier, and I'll go back and set up what we're about to talk about. Right? I feel bad doing that in a podcast where there's some leeway because it is just a conversation. So when a movie, it feels like it's constantly going, oh, by the way, you should know this thing right before it's relevant.
But she's only said like a couple of things so far, and then she adds, oh, and I forgot to tell you.
but even like, yeah, that's a literal thing where she actually says it out loud, but I'm saying the movie feels like it's doing that constantly, even without saying it.
That's true.
It's like, oh, let's introduce this thing because it's about to be important.
Well, I mean, she comes back as the narrator a few times, but even when she's not there, like the characters are still narrating exposition for us all, always.
Yeah, constantly.
It sort of feels like the exposition never ends. I sound like I really don't like the movie, but I actually do.
Well, that's the problem, is that I think it's a movie that we both enjoy in some level, but the problem is that it is a mess, so we're going to discuss why it's a mess.
Yeah.
That's the critical thing to talk about.
It's an enjoyable mess.
I think we summed it up perfectly earlier. It's just, it's falling out the sky, but as it's burning bright as it does, so you can't help but not enjoy some of the spectacle.
Yeah,
you mentioned earlier on, because there's a big deal with it. They go up to the space thing that takes them to Arrakis, and when they're flying over, we get an introduction of their bodysuits and all that. Max von Sydow shows up briefly, by the way.
I forgot to mention he was part of the cast.
Forgot to mention he was there. But they have these suits that, they sort of recycle your own water and can even like hold your feces for a bit, so you can survive for weeks in the desert.
Yeah, nothing's wasted. Everything is recycled. So
okay, that's good to know. And they're going to use that at some point, but they go on this sort of flyby, and they go past like one of the mining, the space mining pods, and there's a worm coming towards them, and they kind of like, and this is where David Lynch has his cameo, but they kind of try to evacuate as many as they can, like, screw the space, now get out of there, which again, it shows you that the Duke cares about people more than it does the profit of the space itself.
So you like him immediately.
Yeah, but Paul's just kind of sitting there, just sort of taking it in, and doesn't seem to like. If Paul said, "No, Dad, we should help them," maybe we would be like rooting for him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just an idea.
Well, I mean, okay, it seems like Paul has a good mentor.
Sure.
And his father.
He has multiple good mentors. That's the problem. Is I like all these mentors more than I do him, from a character perspective.
It's hard not to like Patrick Stewart because we already associate him with a very likable character. Patrick
Stewart. Even Max von Sydow, he's not a mentor necessarily, but even he has kind of a moment where he's like, I like this Duke. Like, he has this moment where he kind of puts over the Duke as being a good guy. But I wanted to mention that because you talked about earlier about the scale of the worms. Like, you this is the introduction to actually seeing a worm. We hear about them before this, and they mention, some of them are, hundreds of meters long, but like, we're expecting this worm to sort of pop out and maybe eat the station from the side or something, or attack the station. Instead, you just see like the four flaps of the mouth just kind of come up out the sand. It completely surrounds this base and just swallows it.
And then some. Like it could probably fit like 20 of the bases in its mouth.
Yeah. So it's this gargantuan thing that, and yeah, it's a bit of a Neo thing almost, because when Kyle MacLachlan eventually drinks the water alive, and he survives it, one of the things now that he can do is he can actually communicate with... He's like Aquaman, actually. Maybe that's a better comparison. He can actually mentally sort of communicate with the worms now.
He's Dr. Doolittle.
He's not just wrangling it like a horse, where he's sort of like whipping it into shape. Now he's actually just mentally talking to it and being like, come on, worms, help us out.
Got a psionic connection.
Yes. He's worm guy.
I like it.
Well, I suppose Worm Man's the exact thing, but
yeah, but not Wormy. Wormy is not good.
Well, I'm thinking Aquaman, Worm Man, Aqua Guy. Who should go Aquaman, Aqua Guy? Sounds cooler. Aqua Guy. No, okay, just me. So. But that's a good moment. That's a good moment. Yeah. That was it. So the whole thing with what's his face from Battlestar Galactica and Quantum Leap. What's his name again?
Dean Stockwell.
Thank you, Dean Stockwell. So he's the Doctor who's going to betray the Duke, right? And again, it felt like there's so much more to like really build up the idea that he feels forced to betray the person who actually appreciates, because he doesn't hate the Duke. He's not some like person who believes in what the Baron's doing. He's forced into this, and the movie like glosses over the fact that he's doing this kind of under duress, like so.
Yeah,
easily.
and he seems to be part of some other faction of humans that we don't really get to see a lot of, because he's got like some diamond pattern on his forehead.
And he also, like, you know, he does a lot of things that even though he betrays the Duke, he makes sure the Duke's ring, which the Baron cares about getting, goes with Paul. He makes sure Paul and Jessica survive. Like, he does a lot of things to show that he's not just like a completely villainous bastard. He's adhering to
it's basically like you're going to die if you come to this planet anyway, so I'm just going to help that along for my own case, but don't worry, I'll take care of your kid and wife.
Yeah, so... But, like, I felt like there's so much build-up to, like, that we could have with this character, like, struggling with the fact that he has to do this. So there's so much character stuff you could do with this. And it kind of, like, just goes... You learn that he's the one who's the insider, the mole. And then... There's maybe, like, 2 more scenes with him before the big, like, thing happens, where he's, like, enacting the plan. So, again, it's just boom, 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 boom. And this isn't the half of the movie that I'd say is less rushed, because the second half is definitely the more rushed half.
Oh, absolutely.
But they're definitely both rushed. There's definitely a rushing feeling in both. Not rushing. Just to make that clear.
Yeah, not rush like the Canadian band.
Slapping the bass.
Singing about trees and stuff.
I mean, it says a lot. That we've, like, other than we were talking about the cast, but we've not even really mentioned that when they get to the Fremen, and Paul becomes their chosen one. Do you know what he becomes? He becomes their Bruce Campbell in Army of Darkness, where he trains them all.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, I could almost hear, like, obviously the Dune music's really good, so I don't want to besmirch that, but you could easily replace it with the dun 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 dun, the music that plays in Army of Darkness when he's training all the knights and stuff. Like, it's kind of that, and again, Dune obviously existed first. I'm not claiming anything here. I'm just saying that there's some of those vibes from it.
Well, it's a montage. It's a training montage.
The problem is that his entire time with the Fremen feel like a training montage, though.
Yeah,
like they have their initial meeting, which is a little bit more like a normal scene, but almost immediately, like, we start just rushing through all the ideas, and
I guess also on before when they crash the ship, where the Gingers have abducted Paul and his mother, and she's bound over the mouth because she's considered kind of like a witch, and she can use her voice to control people, so they have to cover her, but Paul is able to also use his voice to influence the men to do things, to like ungag his mother so that she can use her voice. So I guess that's the first introduction to where we see that he has this ability to use his voice as a weapon.
Yeah, but this is something that's established that other characters, I mean, at least the women can do, right? And this is why he's special, that he's the one man who can do this. But there's a big leap from that to he can suddenly make it rain, I think, because this is something that, okay, other people have this skill. This is something that's established in the world. There's not a lot that this movie establishes well, but it does establish that. So when he starts doing it, it's like, okay, this makes sense. But when we get to the Fremen, though, very quickly it starts rushing through things. And one of the things that it rushes, and I'll tell you right now, if you want me to give a shit about your romance in a story, the one thing that's not going to work is him looking at the woman, and because he's seen a vision of her in his dreams, he's already like, there she is, the woman I love. Like, okay, I feel nothing from this. Nothing. You've seen her in your dreams once. I feel nothing from this. Well, maybe more than once.
She has what reason does she have to be in love with him?
No, but she clearly is, because we see that together very quickly after this. They're just a thing.
I guess so. I guess it was just love at first sight.
There's no, I mean, she has no character really in the movie. I'm sure she does in the book, but in the movie she has no character.
Not really, yeah.
The romance is basically just a footnote. It's like, and they're a couple now, and
It actually is quite surprising how fast it gets to that.
Yeah.
It's just he sees her, that's a woman that he knows he loves, and now they're in love.
And that's it. It's that simple.
They're making out in the sand.
It's that simple. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, not much to say about that. Beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, even the Stargate girl had more reason to be in love with James Spader.
Yeah, I mean, at least he seemed like he was smart, and he smelled at her a few times. That at least shows attraction. You know, like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, so he seems nice, therefore I am attracted to him, and he's handsome, right? That there's more to that than just this, which is, oh, I've seen you in my mind, and she just seems to go, yeah, all right then.
Basically, yeah. But we don't get her perspective at all. So
No. All I can imagine in her head is yeah, I suppose you'll do.
yeah, at least you're not someone that I've known my entire life in a cave.
You're an outsider.
An outsider? Okay.
Yes.
I would have taken anyone.
Yeah. So. I don't know. Are we done? Like, I don't know if we get. Is there any other scenes you want to talk about? Any other moments or ideas?
We sort of started with the ending, so I think maybe we are done.
I told you this was not going to be let's go through the plot like we do, a proper good film like Predator 2.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
But there's so many details, and there was definitely moments where I found myself going, because normally when I'm watching something and I know we're going to talk about it, and it's something I'm watching for the first time where I don't know it, and this is not the case. In this case, it's not a first time watch, but for the sake of all the details, let's just say it's the first time watch. Normally, if I feel like I've missed something in a scene because maybe my attention was like drawn away, I'll go back. I'll go back the minute or 30 seconds or whatever it was, and I'll make sure I take in the information. I don't want to miss anything.
Mm-hmm.
With this movie, there's so many details being thrown at you so often that
you'd have to watch it many times.
you feel like you've just missed something all the time. Like I had that feeling like at least 24 times watching this movie because of how it just speeds through all the exposition and all of the ideas and all the plot. So
I do like that there's some sort of mechanic involved with a lot of the different the factions of people. Like I like that the gingers all have this heart plug that is like a kill switch where the Baron at any point can just decide that you're dead now by pulling out your heart plug. Like he has that. It's specifically installed so that he has the ability to do that.
He looks at that because of that young guy gets brought in his like introductory scene to like put the flowers out or whatever it is, and the Baron's looking at him like a piece of meat. Like it looks sexual, but then he just goes over and just kills him. He just rips
very
this
much
out
like
of him.
the Sting scene later on. Although Sting doesn't have a heart plug, so I guess he must be too high in nobility to have one.
Yeah. The Baron's chomping the bit. He really comes off as like really like perverted just looking at this guy.
Yeah, it does come off as sexual. I think that's supposed to be implied, because he I mean, and the kid like is terrified, like from the moment he walks in, and like that like puts him in his target, in the Baron's target for like, yeah, I'm gonna get you.
Yeah.
Once I'm done with my speech and I'm satisfied with your flowers. And it like he stays with him as he bleeds out everywhere too. So the next scene he's like covered in blood and he's satisfied by it.
Oh, he was very happy with himself. Yeah, that's his afternoon
It's gross.
killing.
Like this is a very successful, gross human being that Lynch has created here.
Yeah, and then his nephew, who we didn't really mention, but like his nephew ends up being put in charge of Arrakis once they take over it after the takeover.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's disgusting as well. He like crushes like weird alien bugs and like drinks the.
Yeah, he drinks it.
Yeah, really nasty. He's just generally disgusting. So you got a bunch of those sort of stale moments with them.
Yeah, they kind of remind me of like Garbage Pail Kids. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
I've heard of them. Yeah.
Yeah, they're it looks very much like a Garbage Pail Kid that grew up.
Joe, I mentioned these characters earlier, so we do see a couple of these characters. One with the Atreides, and then there's Brad Dourif's character, right? And they're a type of person who's effectively become like they're a human version of a computer. They're there to do work that a computer would otherwise do. Now, admittedly, when this was written, computers obviously weren't doing as much than they do. Like I don't.
No, but I like that it's like a biological thing, though.
Oh sure. So I'm just cracking the joke that when this was written, and those lines were put in the book, like I don't think that Herbert was thinking about like, they can also do Photoshop and they can do like stuff like I was just thinking like all
no, they can just do like complex like formulas and stuff in their
Yeah.
heads and very quickly like a computer would.
Yeah.
And I do think that's cool, and I like that I think it's connected to the spice also, where they just drink it and it makes their eyebrows really grow really big, and and also they're very, very quick thinkers. And I like Brad Dourif in the film too.
Yeah,
because I like Brad Dourif. He's always so like, he's like waxy looking. I don't know what it is about him.
And of course he's a villain because he's always a villain.
Yeah. Can't trust him. Can't trust Brad Dourif.
I think he's a good guy. He's in the of all things, the Rob Zombie Halloween remakes, he's like the sheriff, and he's a good guy, which is just one of the many problems with Rob Zombie's Halloween movies.
I'll watch something older where he plays a good person. I'm sure.
I'm sure
it exists.
I'm sure it exists. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's it. I don't know if there's a whole lot of other things other than just like combing scenes for individual little moments or something that are worth mentioning. But it's a mess of a movie full of far too many concepts that either had to be simplified or this had to be turned into at least 2 movies, which funnily enough is what they're at least planning to do with the new one. So we'll see how well it introduces everything. And I'm actually really curious because I think because of all the failings of this movie, it's a really interesting thing to compare it to now once we get the new one, because we'll have this baseline of like, okay, how does it improve things? How does it achieve actually making me care about what's going on in this? And in a way that I feel like the book was doing from what I did get from it, but
yeah, what I remember from the book is that it's written very much like a fantasy novel. Like it's got a lot of really pretty language in it. It reminded me of Lord of the Rings when I was reading it. Actually, it reminded me of Tolkien.
Yeah, but
I mean, I know it's a big sweeping epic and stuff, but it doesn't remind me of like other science fiction books that I've read.
Which to be fair, I think other science fiction does appeal to me a bit more because of that. I definitely go more towards your Terminators and your Expanses and your Babylon 5s. Like there's definitely more, and Star Trek, of course. I shan't not ignore Star Trek. I could see the anger building up in your eyes that I was listing science fiction.
You're getting a big one.
But leaving out Star Trek, how dare I? And of course, Aliens, which is the best movie of all time. Yes.
Anyway, I'll let you know what I think of the book in the next Dune review.
I almost want the audience to place bets if Tara actually gets through doing the book.
I'll get it. Yeah.
Okay. Actually, you know what? This isn't fair because you spend a lot of time at work driving. So and if you listen to the audiobook, you can get through it really easily.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm like minimum 4 hours a day in the car anyway.
Okay. You actually have a pretty convenient
yeah. So it's a pretty
avenue.
safe bet that I'll be able to get through the audiobook in time.
Okay. I'll be curious.
I think it's still a pretty long one, a really long audiobook.
Well, look at it this way. You'll have to get through half of it, technically. In terms
I
of
guess
what's
it's true.
relevant for the movie. You don't know the exact stopping
I
point.
don't retain as much when I do audiobook versus actually reading. But because when I do audiobook, I can think about other things.
You can drift, yeah. You don't necessarily,
Yeah.
you're actually focusing on things. Yeah, it's tougher.
I mean, that happens while reading sometimes too, but like I tend to be more into something when I have the physical book that I'm reading. I don't think there's anything wrong with audiobooks though. So long as you have a good narrator. I had one book that was like, I mean, it was a nonfiction book. It was about like getting better sleep and stuff, but the narrator was like so sexy sounding that I couldn't like get into it.
I thought you were going to say they sounded really boring. I thought, no, that's genius. Have a boring narrator for the one that's meant to put you to
The
sleep.
book about sleep.
That's genius. But no, yeah, sexy doesn't work.
No, it was too distracting.
Just gonna wake me up more. All right, rate Dune.
I'm going to give it a 7.5. I think that it is, yeah, a total mess. And there's a lot of stuff that I think is missing from the film, and a lot of things that are in the film that I'm still missing because it wasn't delivered very well. But man, it's so fun to look at. It's the character designs that I think were more David Lynch than they were Frank Herbert, probably, are like so creative and cool. The soundtrack is so cool. Like the highs in the movie are pretty high. So I'm gonna give it a good plus the half point. 7.5.
Okay. I'm going lower than I did last time when I first watched it, because I think the problems are a bit more, well, problematic, I guess. They're a bit more in your face on a repeat viewing. But I mean, obviously for you watched as a kid, but it'd been so long that this was effectively a first time again. I think.
Well, I watched it a few years ago.
Oh, sorry, you said that. But I think for me, like, I still really like a lot of the things that I liked about it before, but the issues of not caring about the actual characters and things because the storytelling is just a mess, because it's this like almost abridged version of what the story is. Makes it hard to actually care about things. So I'm going to go up a full point less than I did before, because I actually went really high last time. So I'm going to give it a 7 this time. Which is to say that I still think there's a lot of value in watching it, and I still love a lot of things about it. But I enjoyed this more than Blade Runner. Put that in the books.
As do I.
All right, cool. Let us know what you think of Dune 1984 in the comments below. Like and subscribe, all that stuff. I'm going to make Tara pose for the thumbnail now, so we'll see what she comes up with. But here we go. 3, 2, 1, pose. I like it. I like it. It's a challenge, but I like it. So yes, next time I think we're just going straight to the vote winner, which we don't know what the vote is because we're recording this right before the end of September. So whoever wins the vote on Patreon this month is what we're doing next. So,
wow.
Look forward to it.
We just did a vote winner.
I know, but we're getting this one out of the way quicker. We're getting this one out of the way right at the start of October. We'll do the vote winner, which we're all slightly horror skewing sci-fi because it's October, as you would expect. But look for that next week, whatever it may be. I do know what it is because I've seen the results, and there's definitely the winner's decided. But we're not quite at the end of the month yet, so I can't tell you what it is. So
tell me after we stop recording.
Sure. The post that tells everyone what the winners are, though, isn't like locked on Patreon. The public can see it. You just have to go to the Patreon, which is patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. Isn't that right, Tara?
That's right, Peter. If you enjoy our reviews, you can actually go to that Patreon page, patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, and donate as low as $1 per month, and you will get access to bonus episodes of The Ace. And if you donate $5 per month, you will be able to vote on what we watch once a month. Like Peter said, we have horror films, horror sci-fi movies for this month. Who knows what next month will be? Thanksgiving films.
Oh yeah, go on. Name me 4 Thanksgiving sci-fi movies. How dare you?
Okja.
Is that Thanksgiving?
It's about like feasting on animals.
That is a stretch, and you know it. Yes, the Korean film is about Thanksgiving.
Well, if we review it, I'll somehow tie Thanksgiving into it.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah. So head on over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and see if you are interested in any of our bonus material. Thank you.
Yeah, and of course, one of the higher tiers, make sure you're a Patreon producer. So I'll thank our Patreon producers for this month. So thank you to Tyler Hess, Cindy Palacios, David Short, Board Now, Al Treisman, Christopher Moy, David Brown, and Stanley. So thank you to you all for being producers. So there you go. That's pretty much it. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications. Those are the free ways to support us and help us out. All those button clicks do help, and comments do as well. If you listen to the audio version, give us a 5-star rating and a review on iTunes or Podcast Addict or wherever you listen to your podcasts, whatever app you use. If there's a review function or a rating function, put it to the max and say nice things.
We only want max ratings.
Yes. Yeah, don't come at me with some sort of mediocre 3-star rating.
Even if we are mediocre, don't do that.
No.
Nobody wants that rating.
I don't accept it. I shove it back in your face. I fire words at you like Paul Atreides.
Yeah, you'll shout like the Dragonborn.
But yeah, that is pretty much it though. That is the show. That is the Atomic Cinema Experiment. So we'll be back next week with whatever the vote winner is, and we'll see for that. But I did mention earlier that Arrival's coming the week after, so I can tell you what's coming in 2 weeks' time. Arrival's coming in 2 weeks' time.
And then Dune.
And then there may be something before Dune after that though. There may be like another week and then Dune, depending on how it works out. But
you guys know Dune's on the way.
Dune 2021 is on the way, yes. So let us know what you think in the comments. Thank you for watching once again. We always appreciate it. Keep watching science fiction and computer add space.